couple of things between me and Jessica as well. We're going to discuss the design steps, the basics of how to look at a tree, what to look for, how to get it into starting to look like a bonsai. So Josh, are you going to do the main basic sort of things for us first?
Okay, yeah, I can try. If I miss anything out, just shout.
And then what we're going to do is we got 2 trees that Josh brought. There is also a tree of mine that we're going to be putting on. But if you really want to bring your tree and put it up here, and we can discuss it, ek weet Henry, jy het mos enetjie ook, né? So we're going to just do a very informal discussion. Nothing, you're not going to be persecuted if you ask questions or make a statement. So please join in. This is going to be very nice and informal. Okay, Joshua, there's your...
I feel special now. Okay, so the basics of design, you look at your nabari, which is your roof layer. You look at your trunk line, and then you look at your branch placement. So wherever you have the best branch placement is generally, for me, the biggest decider of where your front is going to be. But then again, movement is a big thing. Nabari is, for me, the last thing, because you can always fix nabari, especially with things like figs. You do approach grafts, anything like that, you build a root base over years. So that's why this one, you can see it hasn't really got a root base yet. It's got roots, but it's not a particularly good root base. I'm spilling everywhere. So little things. When you look at front, you could have front anywhere from here to here, but what you want to look at then is building a silhouette. So you want to look at where your silhouette lines at best to fit your entire canopy in, because then it's just visually pleasing. So when you get onto visually pleasing, then you have your negative space, which is the empty space. So this is a good example for negative space.
Yeah.
This is negative space. It's almost the open space. What it's used to do is alleviate the visual weight of the tree. So the visual weight is your trunk and your branches and your canopy. So this empty space here kind of balances your canopy out. So you can see the trees moving towards it, but there's an open space, and then the pot elongates past the tree. Okay, is there anything else?
Okay, what do we, let's ask a question. What do we look at? We've now spoken about nabari. What is the next step to finding the tree's potential? What do we look at next to try and get the tree to look as old and as best possible front as possible? Movement. Yeah. What else? This is a very important one. But I always say, the last year's club members should know this. What's the 2 things? Yes. Movement, taper. So movement in your trunk line. Taper being going from thick to thin. So you can see on Josh's trees that he's got there, we're going from a nice base, and it's going thinner, and at the canopy it should be really, really thin. If you have a look at any tree in nature, you'll see that it goes from thick to really fine branches. They'll never have really thick branches in the top of the canopy because they're an old tree. But our trees, because they're small and they're still relatively young, if you look at it in tree years, they still want to get to that point. So that's why we've got to constantly look at taper to make them as old as possible. Okay, let's talk about styles. So we've got our 5 basic styles: formal, informal, cascade, semi-cascade, and slanting. So those are the basic ones that everything else is derived from. Now what we learn in the basics, now there's a big thing that you have to know the rules to break them. First of all, in Bonsai Addicts, there are no rules. There's guidelines. So we need to know the guidelines so that we can eventually break them, but it still needs to be good enough so that if I break the rules and do something really out of the box, you guys need to still appreciate the composition. Does that make sense? There needs to be a story. So the best way to explain it is you need to walk up to a tree, and the artist shouldn't have to stand next to the tree and explain to you what he's trying to do with that whole composition. You should walk up to it and go, that looks like a bushveld tree that's standing in an outcrop where it's very, very open, in the open sort of bushveld savanna that we've got there. So if you can visualize that and you can get that, then your whole artistic story and your composition has worked, and people can appreciate what you are doing. It's like any art form. We are doing this to get better, to appreciate the art form more, but also to showcase what we're doing and let other people enjoy our talents as well. That's a very, very important part of it as well.
Yeah. It's like any art form. So if you're painting, they teach you brush strokes, they teach you balance, they teach you colors, but at the end of the day, you do what you want to do with those things. You manipulate them so that you can get a picture out of it at the end of the day. Okay, so then there's also like little things like here, okay, I've got this tree, I bought this specifically for this. Who can tell me what's wrong with the way this tree is planted? guys can speak. It's not like
It's pointing towards the
Yes.
right, so but the composition, the trees, it's in the middle now, so it should be pointing towards the left.
yes. Okay, so for one, the tree moves that way, so the negative space is on the wrong side. It almost feels like the tree's falling over. It gives you a sense of imbalance. It makes you feel as though you're going to fall over. It makes you feel unsteady looking at a tree like this. Also, it's also planted, so it's planted almost smack bang in the middle. So that's not really typical. So what you want to do is plant it just off middle because you don't want perfection. So bonsai is about finding perfection in imperfection. So it's about trying to make the best of what you can with something that's imperfect. So you never want it to be spot on.
Okay, what is that called? What are those lines that we're using? What is the rule of? Thirds. So like any art form, photography uses it a lot as well. You're always wanting to plant your tree on one of those third lines.
Fibonacci numbers, Reno.
Yes, there's Reno with the Fibonacci. So that just makes it pleasing. You're working in threes or in thirds. The eye can make a nice picture of it and it's pleasing to the eye. So that's why we don't plant in the middle, because it looks too balanced. The other reason for that is if you look culturally in Japan, the center point, and because of their whole religion and spiritual stuff that they do, is reserved for Buddha. So that's why they will never plant a tree in the middle. However, there is still a breaking of that guideline. A round pot, you'll plant a tree in the middle. Because there you've got a very big canopy, you want to showcase a tree, maybe it has multiple fronts, so that's why you want to showcase a tree in a round pot. So you can't in a round pot put it off center because it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to have the proper negative space where you've got with a normal pot that it's wider than what it is deep.
Yeah. And then also, who else can tell me what's wrong with the tree besides the pot? Yeah,
Is it possible that you can maybe turn it a bit so we can...
Yes, and it's quite small, sorry, I feel sorry for everyone at the back. It's got a handlebar. These two branches right here, especially at the angle that it has to sit at, these two branches have a handlebar, so they're exactly in line.
Pretty much what you do with the back branches, if it's say like this and you've got handlebar branches, if you change your front, this one you can bring down the back and in. Or you can then bring it further up and up.
Yeah.
Your foliage gives you your visual weight, not your branch.
So when you're moving up
use it.
the trunk line, your eye doesn't want to go in two directions at the same time, because that's what stops you from moving up the tree. But what tends to happen then, so another thing you can look at to decide is your trunk movement. So if my trunk is curving this way, you take the branch on the inside of the curve out. If it's curving that way, I would have taken this one out. For me personally, I feel like this is the weakest branch.
Yeah.
This one,
Also
the tree,
underneath all the other
yeah,
ones.
and the tree's moving that way, so I don't necessarily need that lowest one. I don't want to confuse my movement.
You can do it one of two ways. You can either have a very balanced tree, where your opposite branch to your movement is very, very elongated. So that gives you balance. Otherwise, you can do it the other way, which Josh wants to do, is you have a very elongating branch in the same direction as the movement. So that will accentuate your direction of movement quite a bit.
So
then you've got to watch potting angle.
Yeah, my pot would also have to extend this way, like that. So you can feel the tree moving towards where your pot goes, moving towards your negative space.
Another question. How do we choose the front? What do we look at?
Look at that, where the apex is.
One of the reasons, so apex, if it's going away from you or coming back, then also like boom van jou kry, né? Like what Ollie said, we're looking at apex. So what does the apex need to do to showcase where front is?
Lean back.
Comes towards you.
Must come towards you. So the whole thing goes about, same thing in Japanese sort of culture, everything needs to come towards you, needs to embrace you. So the tree needs to not sort of like go, this oak stinks like a flippin' pig. It needs to go, I want to give you a nice big hug. So that's why the apex comes towards you. The rest of the tree can go away. As long as the apex comes towards you, you'll be fine with your design.
Isn't it also your first two branches? You want them to feel like your tree
tree
is hugging
branches
you.
need
It
to
wants
come
to embrace
towards
you.
Correct.
So they come just towards you.
So you can see on that tree that Henry's got, the top branches. Now the one that picks my eye up the most is this guy here. That is your thickest branch. It's the most prominent branch for the apex. So if you turn it around for me, Josh, so look at the back. This would have been a possible front, but can you see how the tree is disappearing into the backdrop? So you're not really working unless we would have to cut that branch off and develop the one that's coming towards us. But this one that's coming towards us, do you agree that it doesn't have as much character?
No.
It's quite straight. The other one's got a little bit of a bend in it. The problem with these species, it's your miniature pride of India, they are very brittle. So you either have to cut back and then develop your movement from growing it out, or you've got to try and wire it, but you're going to have to be exceptionally quickly, because if it cracks, you're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Slow and steady wins the race when it's brittle. Yes.
Wouldn't you want to show off the deadwood feature?
Or hide some
depends
like
on what
an
the-
ugly scar, and then
Yeah.
you like to put that at the back instead.
Yeah, so at the moment they're not very nicely
Which-
sort of carved and that, and I know Henry did say that he wants to work on the carving with those pieces as well. They callus actually really beautifully, so you can actually get rid of the scars completely.
What I would do if you want to get a look at the movement is, so this was the opposite to what we said could have been front, but if you want to show off the carving, you kind of find a dual medium and you go in the middle. So here's your strongest branch, it's still here. You can still pick up the carving, or you could go to the other side, so then you can feel the movement is not just moving this way, it's not moving away from you, it's just moving sideways, but then you see this carving. So the sides could then become one of your fronts if you want to pick up the carving, if that's the element of your tree that you want to like really put emphasis on.
Okay, but now the other thing that, yes,
I just want to check, and maybe it's a stupid question, but is the apex the same as the stem? If you are saying the apex should be towards you, are you saying that the stem should be
well, the
slanted
apex is
towards-
your last part. So if you look at us, our apex is here, our hair and stuff like that. So a tree, so technically you can have your tree doing that, and your head and that can come forward. That would be, so your apex is your, pretty much your last, I would say your last sort of like sixth or whatever of your tree. So it's your last cloud, so you can see that branch that we're discussing. It's that last canopy that creates the apex. Now apex could be either a point, or it could be a rounded dome as well. So you've got a couple of ways of creating an apex. But it's your final point. What an apex does is, as your eye line follows the trunk, your apex stops your eye from disappearing up, and then you can visualize the rest of your branch structure. So it's that
Okay,
last
so
point.
your stem can be away from you, but the apex can come back to you, and it's
And you
fine.
see that a lot with literatis, because they're very, very much the breaking of every single rule. So they will do all sorts of weird twists and turns, go away from you a lot, and then come back.
And
And
it's
it could
not
be a
what's
slight
happening
movement,
here.
your eye picks it up.
Okay.
So like this is an exposed root sort of literati style, but you can see the trunk dips in and it comes back towards you.
Okay.
So everything here is coming back towards you, so it kind of, it pulls you away and then it puts you back so that you can actually look at the tree as a whole.
Wouldn't it, as you're holding it there,
Yes.
at that angle,
Yes, this
would
is
it
the...
not be
Yeah.
better to repot it at
Yes.
that angle in
Yes,
that pot?
that is the plan. That
That's
is
the next
plan.
discussion.
That's why I was on the blocking.
So the other thing as well for deciding your front is looking at your base, your navari, and looking at your trunk movement. Now, the way that I normally explain it is, if you do 50-50, then you try and get as much of your base in as possible and as much trunk movement or character as possible. Now, most of you will know that I will prefer trunk movement and character to a base, like what Josh was talking about. Remember, a base we can build, we can graft it, we can do a lot of stuff with the base. It's very, very difficult to create natural character in your trunk line.
Can I just add to that? Don't feel like junipers and olives you can't do that too, because in Europe they approach graft onto junipers and olives all the time. That's how you get a branch where you really need one. So building a root base through approach grafts is a really viable option, even for hardwooded species.
Okay, for the new members that don't know, approach graft is basically where you take a similar species and you would infuse it into your tree.
Yeah, they
So you're
fuse together,
basically-
they become
yes.
one.
So if you have two trees like this, you would take off the outer bark layer of this side, outer bark layer of that side, get them together, like really, really tight. That's the one method, and allow it to grow into each other. The other method is where they actually bore holes.
Thread.
Thread
Yes,
graft.
thread
Yeah.
grafting, like straight through. And they would take the new little stemmy plant, plant it in there with roots, take it straight through the hole and let it grow out the outside.
What we're doing with grafting is we're either improving faults or you take the best, what would you call it, sort of functions or properties of the trees. So say for instance we graft a black pine on a white pine, or actually the other way around. Black pine's root system is amazing, but the needles are long. But white pine's needles are short, but the root system is not so great. So you graft white pine onto black pine, and you've got best of both worlds. So that's what they do in the horticultural world. We're gonna discuss that, and I'm gonna help Henry with it today. But what else can you guys see that's a problem with that tree?
The lower branches are quite thin.
Yeah, and are they actually really usable?
No.
Because we've got so much character. If you ever look at those branches, and I agree with you, there's so much character in the stem, and they're almost hiding that really natural character. So we take most of those bottom branches off. So I would say like that one, this one, and possibly those two. We would have to see how they work. We might be able to use one of them, maybe. But by doing that, that top apex branches we can actually bring down on the left, on the right hand side there.
Because these are really stiffened up here, so they're not so brittle.
Yeah,
So you can bring them down,
so
and then you create a silhouette.
Yeah, so we're immediately getting that same thing that Josh was talking about, the negative space. So on the left-hand side, we'll have a lot more foliage and visual weight. On the other side, we'll then get rid of that other branch, bring some down, but you'll be working in thirds. So you'll have 2/3 of foliage to 1/3 negative space on that side. Okay, does that make sense?
No, and also if you take a bonsai, you need to try and create age even with a young tree, and that's why we always tend to bring the branches down, because the old tree will spread its branches down while a new tree will grow whips up. So we're trying to mimic age by bringing them down as well.
Yeah. Even your deciduous trees, they do come up first, but then as the bottom branches get older and longer, they come
slope
down again,
out.
so they almost have like a sort of a bow in it. Yeah. Up and then down.
I just want to say with the taper, especially with the bonsai shows, if you look at the tree from the top, then it can look quite straight. So you need to look at the tree.
Three
So
dimensions.
hoe draag, je moet ons meer af de angle afkijken, anders kan je niet afzien nie.
That's why, like overseas, I think I'm on the same. What we're doing is in Japan and those places they've got a barrier. You're not allowed to go close to the trees. So then that is your viewpoint. You're not supposed to look. It's like looking under a girl's dress. You're not supposed to do that. Same thing in Japan. You're not supposed to go and look at the tree from behind. So when they do judging, the artist is. Did you like that? The artist has selected this as front, and the people should appreciate that this is what.
And
he's
you'll
trying to
always see
portray.
them going down on eye level. So
So if you work on your tree, just constantly go down.
Yeah.
Try
Yeah.
not to work.
But that's why the 6 views of a tree work nicely as well. So when 6 views, yeah. So you've always got front, back, side, and then you've got from the bottom and from the top. Now when designing a tree, I use obviously my front quite a lot, but these days I've designed it from a different angle because I'm getting too much into a repetitive nature. But from the top, you can see how your branches
yeah, you can
fill
space.
up the space. So like that one that Josh was showing, you can see that they've all got their little space in the sun. And that's what we're trying to portray. That's why we call it branch placement and not styling. Because in the beginning, what you're doing is you're placing your branches for horticultural values to end up with a nice bonsai that will be artistically pleasing. Does that make sense? So that's what we're actually looking at. Because if you do an amazing design and you put branches on top of other ones, the lower ones are going to die. So it's not practical. So we need to work with the practical values of the trees first and then apply our design skills to that.
You know, you can add that, like you said, some trees are two-dimensional,
Yeah.
really flat.
Correct.
Look at the top, you see there is things moving out to both sides, not just
Correct.
one side, but the picture is flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to create depth when you're styling your trees.
So
No,
what
that's why you don't just have the left, right, you have the back
That's-
as
yeah,
well,
the-
because you
the-
need depth.
Yeah, it's that foliage, like Anthony said earlier, on the back branch. It's sort of, so your eye sees something further, so it pulls you in.
Yeah. The other thing is, I spoke about it the other day with one of the Facebook posts, is we talk about diagonal foliage. So what I look at is you look at your horizontal lines, but if you sort of start going on the different axes, your diagonal lines, you need to have foliage filling in there because that also draws the eye line right up through the tree. And that's very important fillers because they're not perfectly left or right or back, but they really make a big difference to give you that visual weight that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Cool, so I think we can then get the workshop started. Is everyone happy? Cool.